So, overview of what tools we're going to be using. So, basically, you can use, favorite is basically you can get skate tools. These are very usually sold with skates. Failing that, you can buy your own. These are about $15 for universal skate tool. You can use an adjustable wrench for some of the work. Adjusting, I don't recommend trying to use them for the wheels because it's very hard to get in there with an adjustable wrench, but they still have their place. For I even have a full-size wrench for adjusting the toe stop nuts. So that's wrenches. Oh, and the other one is the power driver for taking off wheels. Love this thing, but totally optional. Another optional thing is this is a bearing puller. It's basically works. Just put a little pimple at the end. You put it down, press it into your bearing, and pop your bearings out of your wheels. I will be showing you another way of doing things with besides using a bearing puller. Again, handy but not necessary. As I said before, pin, basic fabric pin. You need this to open up your bearings. This is where I throw it away and lose it. Degreaser. This is pretty straightforward degreaser. You can use other things. Some people use isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol. Be honest, this stuff's cheap enough. I think this was like $3 something for this much, and considering you use very little each time you do it, this will probably last me another 5 years at least. See, a small container. This is for putting your bearings in to clean them out, preferably sealable so that you could use a small jar, a mason jar. Basically something that's small enough that you can reach in and pull things out. If you really want, you can buy bearing cleaning kits, and these usually come with some sort of rack to put all your bearings on, and then submerge them in the degreaser, which is really kind of cool, but again, totally optional. I think these containers cost me a couple of dollars. These run $10, $15. Oil. This is actually bearing oil, but you can use any fine machine oil. You don't want to use like 3-in-1 oil. It isn't fine enough. But if you look on Amazon, you search for skate bearing oil, it'll list up. Unfortunately, it also lists 3-in-1 oil, so you kind of want to avoid that. Paper towels, useful for cleaning things and putting down on, especially if you're doing this on like a kitchen table because dust and dirt get places. Basic multi-surface cleaner. Saying that, you can also use this. This is a cleaner and degreaser. So if you've got your tub full of degreaser, you can just dip a paper towel in that and use that to wipe things. Handy again, but not necessary. Old toothbrush for getting into crevices to clean them out, and maybe a small bottle brush, but again, getting into little crazed places in the nooks of wheels. Handy to get some of the cleaning stuff. And that's pretty much it. Nothing too expensive, nothing too specialized. You can buy what you can make do until you buy stuff. You don't even have to buy stuff. So aside from that, we'll start on the basics of skates. So I'm going to start with the very basics, like you've never seen a skate before. So hey, this is a skate. You've got a boot. That's where your foot goes. Attached to the boot is your plate. Plate is what can be either metal or plastic resin. I won't go into the pros and cons of each. That's a skate buying tutorial thing. Attached to the plate, you have your toe stop, which will be attached via either a nut, as in this, or here, which is a hex bolt. We'll go into that when I get to the disassembly. Also attached to the plate, you have two kingpins, which are basically bolts that come out of the plate. And on those kingpins are what you use to attach the trucks. So you'll have some sort of bushings. These are the rubber bits in here. You'll also have the truck itself, which is this metal bit, which has the axles for the wheels. And then you'll have an adjustment nut. We'll go into that when I get to later again, going into the basics of it. Then attached to the trucks, so you've got your wheels. The wheels will have two bearings, one on the inside, one on the outside. And then you'll have the nut which retains the wheel. And that's pretty much all of your skate. So, I'm going to start with disassembly. First off, gonna remove the toe stop. So for removing the toe stop with the nut, you just get your skate tool or wrench, break the nut loose. And as soon as that's loose, it should start to unscrew. Now, please note that for the nut retained toe stops, there'll also be a compression washer. Don't lose that. So this is a slightly rounded washer, and that helps to squish down and retain the toe stop when the nut's tightened. If you lose that, you're gonna have to get another one because it doesn't do anything good for the toe stop to just use the nut. If you've got the hex bolt, then so for skate tool, the skate tool will have a hex remover. Failing that, you can also get Allen wrench. I actually prefer the Allen wrench because it gives you better leverage for turning. And again, once you do that, toe stop should unscrew quite easily. And then you've got the toe stop removed. Okay, wheels. So for your indented skate tool, these are actually kind of cool for this. They simply slot in. They spin around very handily. These skate tools, again, one of these, just remove it. And obviously, power tool, really easy. I'm not going to strip everything off of this because I don't have time for me to do everything on these. So once you've basically got, I'm not going to remove the traps because that's kind of an advanced topic. Truck maintenance, I will cover that at the end of the demo. But you can clean most everything with just your toe stops off and your wheels off. So, getting on to, before we get to cleaning that, I want to look at removing your bearings from your wheels. Now, as I said, you've got two bearings for each wheel, one on the inside, flat surface, one on the outside, which is indented. Now, to remove these without a bearing puller, you can slot it just onto your axle a little, and twist. Turn it, twist, do that a few times. And then pops right off. Don't force it too much, just pop it back and forth a few times. That will get your inner bearing out. For the outer bearing, you can do the same thing, but it's not quite as easy. The other thing you can do then is actually press against the edge of the bearing using the axle and pop it out that way. If you do get a bearing puller, it's actually that simple. You just push the button in, put that in, release the button, pop it out. And if the outside bearing is difficult, you can actually show it on camera there. So I'll put it in from the back and just push it down, pop the thing out. So there. Got all my bearings out of my wheels. Actually, I don't. So when all's said and done, you're going to have, if you've removed all your wheels and removed all your bearings, you're going to have 16 bearings sitting around. Okay, so getting into cleaning. Cleaning your skate itself is pretty easy. You just want to use some paper towel, use a little cleaner, a little soapy water will do, and literally just clean in here. You're finding a tough spot, again, a little bit of cleaner on a toothbrush just to get into some of the nooks and crannies. It is worthwhile doing this because things get gummed up and you're skating over all sorts of surfaces. Sometimes it's cleaned before you practice, sometimes it's not. You go outside, you go, these are outdoor wheels and these are real, these will always get very grimy. The other thing to note is looking at your axles. The axles are very liable to get things like hair and gunk right up against the base of the axle here. If you see what looks like a felt pad there, that's like compressed hair and that. You want to pull that off and throw it away. The other nice thing to do is wipe around the axle and clean the threads out using some paper towel. Just spin it, just gets all the gunk off, lets things work better. And when you're done, just get another clean paper towel, dry off any cleaner, remove any excess. Make sure that you're not leaving too much residue behind. It's not a major deal, but other thing you want to do, clean your wheels. The surface of the wheels is a porous rubber. And again, the degreaser actually works pretty well here for it. But again, any cleaner will do. A little bit of cleaner. Because wheels are rolling over the surface, anything on the surface can get stuck to the wheels. And it's amazing how much gunk adheres to these things. So, and again, sort of to get into the little spokes and crevices, toothbrush, or even this wheel, this little round brush I like for getting inside the center of the wheels. Toothbrush to get in the little nooks and crannies of the you can spend a day cleaning your skates if you want to, just getting them sparkly clean. You can even soak your wheels in cleaner if you want. If you really want to get them clean, if they're like really grimy, it doesn't hurt. Just make sure that before you reassemble them with bearings, that they're thoroughly dry and clean, so that you're not getting anything that could have degreaser in it or next to the bearings. The other thing you want to do is clean your toe stops. Again, surface of these picks up grit and grime and whatever else when you're using them on the ground. Obviously, anything that makes contact with the ground is going to pick up grease and grime. And again, a little bit of spray, a little bit of cleaning, and you might find that suddenly your toe stops are doing a lot more stopping when you work on them. Outdoor ones especially, you can wind up with grit and that embedded in them, and it's a good idea to get that out before you, in case you decide to use them like indoors and scratch up your nice linoleum floor, or even worse, a wooden floor or whatever. Because, especially if your kids are doing it and they decide, oh yes, I'm going to go outside, now I'm going to come inside, now I'm going to step on things. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay, so that's pretty much cleaning the skates themselves. The next bit, which is the difficult bit, is cleaning the bearings. This is the more complex bit. Now, I'm going to show this close to the camera. Bearings basically have two sides. Your bearings may be slightly different, but you should have one side with what we call a shield. It's sort of like some sort of plastic rubbery insert, and the other side will be slightly different. I have seen bearings with shields on both sides. Doesn't really matter. So in this case, we're looking at removing the shield so that you can get the dirt out of the bearings. So this is where we're using our magic pin, and to remove this shield, push the pin in beside the shield, and you just need the tip of the pin in there on the inside of the shield, pry it up, twist it, and the shield pops off. So then you actually get to see what the bearing is, one side, and the shield, which is just a little rubberized bit of metal. Okay, so you're going to want to do that for 16 bearings. I'm not going to do that because we don't have the time and it's kind of boring. One thing you will find is when you take your bearings off, if you actually spin them, if you feel that sort of clunkiness, then it's really a sign that this bearing needs a good cleaning. If it's like spinning nice and freely, I think I cleaned this one when I was prepping for the video. It's spinning lovely and cleanly, so it probably doesn't actually need a clean. This one's not spinning so freely, so it probably does need a clean. So I'm going to pop this one off. And there is the question of how often you want to do this. Ideally, at least once a year, preferably at least once every 6 months, and really ideally like once every 3 months. Outdoor wheels, you don't tend to care so much, but probably want to do it at the end of the season after you do your last outdoor skate, get all that grime and that off. They're going to get a lot more gritty and grimy from being outdoors, but your indoor skates, you're going to want to do this preferably every 3 months or so. So once you've got the shields off, once you get into it, removing the shields is just a nice, straightforward thing. Once you've got your shields off, you want to pour a bit of degreaser into your container. Got your degreaser, and then you just put your bearings into the degreaser. I also tend to dip the shields in as well. I don't leave them in there, just dip them in there and put them on a piece of paper towel. once you've got your bearings in there, take it about, just loosen up, make sure the degreaser gets in everywhere and that any bits of grips and any bits of dirt get shaken out. Then you probably want to leave those for a little bit. While you're leaving those sit, take your shields and finish cleaning them. Maybe you can use a bit more of a degreaser. Just make sure they're clean, make sure there's nothing sticking to them. Make sure you don't lose them because they are important at keeping grit out of your bearings. But okay, so another clean bit of kitchen towel, paper towel. Sorry if I say kitchen towel, I mean paper towel. It's a British thing. So once it take the bearings out of the degreaser, spin them a bit. If you're really wanting to do this properly, you probably want to dip them in, spin them about a little, put them back in and leave them soak, shake them about. Do that a couple of times just to make sure that anything in there is being shaken free. So anyhow, once you've taken them out of the degreaser, you want to put them on a piece of paper towel and leave it sit for probably 5 minutes, ideally, at least. If you want, you could sort of do all your bearings first, leave them sit, clean one skate, take them all out, put them on paper towel to dry, then clean the other skate. That gives you time for them to both soak and then also time for them to dry. I'm doing this a bit quickly because of our time limit, so this is going to wind up being rather iffy as far as the skate goes, because it's probably going to wind up with a bit of degreaser left in here. But for purposes of speed, one thing you will notice if you spin this a bit, if there was any clunkiness before, it's probably going to feel like it's spinning a lot better now, simply because there's nothing in there to bind anything up. No grease, no grit. Both of these are spinning lovely and freely. The downside right now is you've removed all the lubrication as well. That holding the inside, these should spin for quite some time. Obviously you don't want to put these back together with no lubrication in there, because as it goes on, it's going to wind up heating up as you skate along on your wheels, and then like an engine that has no oil in it, it's going to cause them to wear and bind up and be irrecoverably bound up, so that you'll have to get new bearings. And bearings run anything from $25 to $40 for decent bearings. So this will prolong the life of the bearing by a great deal. So doing this every 3 to 6 months will save you a lot of money in the long run. Okay, so you take your bearing oil, sewing machine oil will also work, but any fine machine oil. All you need is 2 drops. 1 drop on one side, 1 drop on the other side. Put the oil in there, spin it around a bit. That just works up. Turn it in different orientations, but yeah, really you just want to spin it a bit. Make sure that oil's worked fully in. Drip, drop. Don't put too much in because then it's going to leak out. There, once you've got your oil on your bearings, you want to replace the shields. So to replace the shield, take the non-metal side, well, the metal side goes inwards, and it's just place it there and just press it, and you should feel a definite click as it goes in. Spin it again just to make sure it's still spinning freely. If not, try removing the shield and putting it back on. You can put them on the wrong side, but you want the side with the metal exposed, not the side with any sort of plastic coating. So again, shield over it, and just a light push. Don't shove it in, just push it, and you should feel it seat. And again, a little spin, just make sure it works. And that's it. That's your bearings clean, ready to go back in the wheels. So, reassembly of the wheels. So you've got your wheels, which you've cleaned. You've got your bearings, which you've cleaned. So put them in. There's a couple of ways. Again, if you've got the bearing pusher, well, I'll do that in a sec. It's easier, but nice, easy way to put the inside ones in is put the bearing on your axle and put your wheel there. Actually, helps you put it this way. And you can just push down, seat your bearing nicely in the back of the wheel. Now the front one, this won't work as well because obviously the bearing, the wheel doesn't go all the way down to the bearing surface. So, I mean, you can just try pushing it in and pressing it, and that generally does seat it reasonably well. Then give it at all points, give it a spin just to sort of like make sure it's running well. The other way to do it is, well, I'll first show you using the bearing pusher. So you put the bearing on here, and again, just pop. But if you don't have that bearing pusher, the other way, if you can't push it in, is to first put the wheel on, put the bearing in, and push it in as far as you can, and then put your nut on, and then use, you hear that squeaking, that's your bearing being pushed in. Just tighten up your nut until you go fully in, and that's your bearing fully seated. Do that on the other side, put my wheels back on. And if you push these in manually, I recommend doing this as well, just to make sure that you haven't it fully in, not just slightly out. Okay. Which brings us to the next part of putting your wheels back on. And this is something people do incorrectly, even just swapping their wheels. You want to make sure your wheels are tight, but not too tight. So I've tightened this one right down to make sure the bearing's in. And now it won't spin at all freely. So you want to loosen that off till it spins nice and freely. Okay. Downside is if you're feeling that, you can feel it knock up and down. So that's too loose. So you want to find that nice midpoint between free movement and free rolling and not shaking up and down. So I've tightened it, it's not shaking, now it's not rolling freely. So it's just that fine, it's not rolling quite freely enough. That's just about there, a teeny bit more, There, rolling lovely and freely, no play. This is just a rule of thumb because as you get more advanced, I know some skaters who actually like a bit of play back and forth. But for people who are starting out or people who are like not sure how they like their wheels, I recommend that sort of nice free rolling and no play. So, tighten this one correctly. It's almost there. Once you've done this a few times, it just becomes pretty natural. When I'm putting on wheels, I'll tighten them all the way, then just back them off like until I'm happy with them. And that's that. That's sort of wheels back on. So next thing is your toe stops. Start with the nut toe stops. So remember, these are your toe stops. You've got the split one, the compression washer, and you've got your nut. When you clean this, you've probably taken these off. Just make sure you don't lose things. Now, one thing, some people love these toe protectors. Actually, I quite like them. You see, this has gotten a fair bit of use over the time. Thing to remember about these toe protectors is they go over the stem of your toe stop. Do not put them in between the nut and the socket. Sideways over there. They don't go like that, because that's going to cause the nut to not tighten down properly, and so your toe stop will keep falling off. Ask me how I know. You want, if you buy these, you want them first on the toe stop, then your nuts, and then your compression washer. Good tip, that. Okay, I'm not going to put these on. So to put these on, so first put your nut on, screw it down probably about halfway down the stem, and put the compression washer on. Then start screwing it into here. Now, if you feel this bind at all, take it out and clean things out. You don't want to cross thread these. You're either going to ruin the threads on here or ruin the threads in the plate. Ruining the threads on your toe stops are a lot less expensive than ruining the threads in your plate, let me tell you. So yes, if you feel it just like tight, you've got it cross-threaded. Just work it gently. The other possibility is there's some grit or something in there. So you're going to want to, forgot to put the compression washer on. So just as it goes in, it should spin nice and freely. Now, the other question people have is what height their toe stop should be. So again, it's a personal preference. But again, if you're not sure, you're new to this, there's a good rule of thumb. And that's the 3-finger rule. So what I'm doing is I've got this in to what I think is an average height. I've hand tightened this nut just so that the toe stop doesn't wobble back and forwards. Then I'm putting the front wheels down and the toe stop down, and I'm trying to put 3 fingers under that back wheel. You see, I've got way too much space there. That's a good rule of thumb. Now, problem is everyone's fingers are different, but generally, if the skater's fingers do this, that's the general rule of thumb, because the skates are likely to be their size. So if the parent does it, well, their fingers are likely to be bigger. So this needs to come further out. So I did that about 3 turns. Again, there, that's about right. My 3 fingers are just about touching there. About right. Again, it's a rule of thumb, and if you do that, then find that's like too tall or too low, it just gets it in about the right place. So with that in about the right place, you want to tighten it up. So you either take your wrench or your adjustable wrench, whatever, put it in, hold the toe stop, put the skate flat on the ground, on the back like this, hold the toe stop so it doesn't spin as you're doing this, and just give it a tight. And the compression washer lets you tighten this down pretty hard without damaging anything. Then if you give it a good tug, it shouldn't twist at all. So that's it for the toe stop. For the hex bolts, it's actually quite simple. Again, make sure you're not finding any binding or cross-threading. Should spin in quite nicely. Get it to about the right height. I do my, okay, that's a bit too tall. 2, that's about right. And for the hex bolt, you will want to, this is where I really like having the Allen wrench, because you really want to cinch this down tightly, and this gives you a lot of leverage for tightening. I've never had this undo come loose during playing hex nuts. So that's tight, and I don't think I could twist it if I tried. So that's your toe stop, and that's basically your skates back together, having been cleaned. Next, I'm going to quickly go into the slightly more complex things of truck adjustment and just reassembly. So basically, you will find a couple of styles of adjustment nuts. This is your basic adjustment nut. It's a lock nut, so it's got a little nylon insert so it doesn't come loose. There's no sort of clear view of how tight or loose it is. My motors are actually kind of nice because they've got numbers on them so that you can tell, and a number of the more expensive skates will have something like this, and these are actually spring loaded so that they each time you tighten or loosen them. So that makes it nice and easy to tell how tight or loose it is. So the question is, why do you want to tighten and loosen these? And the thing to know is the whole purpose of trucks is to let your wheels move independently of the skate. See that? Moves left, moves right, separately of the skate. So that when you have the skate on the floor, you can use your edges to turn even without picking your foot up and putting it in a new direction. You want to just lean and turn, lean and turn. Gives you so much more control. So when you get these starter skates, you'll generally find that these nuts are really cinched down tight so that these will barely move at all. And that's good. That's done for a reason. It's so that when you're starting, you don't just sort of like fall over. I mean, you do that enough anyway, but if your trucks were loose, you would find that you would fall over even more. So once you get more comfortable on your skates, you need to learn to loosen your trucks up a little. And to do that, again, use a wrench. And so you want to do this at the start, just before practice. You don't want to do it after, sort of like in between practices, because you'll have forgotten. And then you'll get out on the floor and go, oh, why am I all over the place? You want to do that just before practice, so you're aware that you've loosened your trucks. And you just want to grab it and take it a quarter turn. That's all. Don't do more than that, unless you feel that like it's super tight and there's no play in them. But you really want to just do a quarter turn at a time. Go out, go onto the floor, skate around, do at least 3 laps, preferably longer. If you do that 3 to 5 laps, you'll sort of notice, you almost certainly notice that you're sort of like more wobbly. If you sort of are comfortable with it, fine, leave it. Do the entire practice with that tightness. Don't be tempted to do more. Then next week when you come back, or next practice when you come back, try another quarter turn. If you've done that quarter turn and you're just literally can't control yourself, come back, try doing 1/8 of a turn to tighten it up a little. And that's sort of, and the other thing to remember is what you're comfortable with today may not be what you're comfortable with in next week or 3 weeks down the road. So it is a constant thing. You finally get to the point where you sort of like do that quarter turn, and then you find that there's actually just wobbling there. Then that's too loose, because you need those bushings, those rubber bits in here, need to be compressing this at least a little. So you want them to have some bite on the trucks. So you don't want that wobble back and forth, but you want, so basically the looser it is, the more twist you'll get out of it, but you don't want it so loose that the bushings aren't doing it. So that does get to the point where you go, well, what happens if I want them looser than that? And you can get softer bushings. So bushings that you can, that will compress more. I've done that for my skates. Not sure if you can get softer bushings for these, but you might be able to. But then you can tighten them down more and still have that maneuverability you're wanting. I think this is still too loose. So that's bushing adjustment. If you want to take these apart, clean them, which is not a bad thing to do. There's one trick up. So I noted that these have numbers on them, so you can tell where you've set them. These do not. The first thing to do is take a look at how much thread is above the nut. That's the first thing to note. So it's like, oh, I've got like 1.5 threads on the left-hand side. The other thing to do, which is take a Sharpie, put a line on the nut and a corresponding line on the bolt kingpin. Show up, corresponding line on the kingpin and the nut. That way, when you go to put it back on, you go, well, I've got about 1.5 threads on the left-hand side there, and it's lining up. So it all should be exactly as you left it. So if you want to take these off, it is simply a case of undoing the nut. I really recommend that you be very sensible about putting everything in a nice row, not then the first shield, and bushing, then the trucks, then the other bushing, then the other shield. Depending on your skate, they may be slightly different composition for the truck assembly, but that's generally it. So just to like make sure they're in a nice row, then you can clean each bit individually and clean the kingpin. And then when you reassemble, it's just take each bit from where you've done it and put it back on in line, put the nuts on, tighten it up till like everything lines up, and then your skate should be good to go again. If you forgot to do that or whatever, then simply tighten it pretty tight, make sure that both front and back look about the same, and sort of like put them on and skate with them a little, and if they seem too tight, loosen it. If they seem too loose, tighten it. But that's basically the only bit of advice I can give you for that. And to be honest, that's pretty much it for basic skate maintenance. There's sort of more advanced topics here and there, but aside from replacing plates and things like that, I think that's pretty much it. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to message me. But aside from that, I think we're going to leave it to there. Hope you all enjoyed it, or at least found it informative. And goodbye and stay safe.